Welcome, my friend, to Defining Moments Vlogs. This is Jennifer Packham. If you've had a defining moment that shattered you, leaving you to piece together your life, these vlogs are for you. I share journal excerpts from my life-altering defining moments and the wisdom I've gained from them. I hope they bring you renewed possibilities, clarity, and faith in your toughest moments. This is episode 24. In my last episode, I spoke about how I made photo albums for my brothers, my dad, for myself, for Christmas. I found a list that my mom had made where she was going to do these photo albums for us, and I felt very inspired to do them. I spent countless hours, numberless days, and all the money I made from subbing ballet over the summer finishing them. My husband wouldn't contribute any money towards them, so I prayed I would have enough to pay for all the developing of the negatives and pictures and paper and binders to complete the albums. I made copy after copy of special pictures that none of us had ever seen before. My mom helped me, I have no doubt. Looking back, I cannot see any other way I could have done all that. I completed 2 4-inch wide albums for each of us kids and 5 for my dad, 15 in all. When it came time to give my brothers their albums on Christmas Eve, when we always got together to open gifts as a family, none of them knew anything about them. All year, I kept it from them. Their wives knew, and my dad knew, because he contributed some money to help me complete them. When all the other gifts were open, my brothers' wives got their husbands' albums and just simply placed them in their laps. 2 of my brothers cried. The other 2 just sat there amazed. My dad was proud, but couldn't open his that night at all. He was afraid that if he looked, he might not stop crying. It was the most wonderful, joyful feeling of service I've had in all my life. I know my mom was there with us. I could feel her spirit so strong. I know she was saying thank you for finishing the project I started and never finished. When I got home that night, I could still feel the beautiful feelings of thanks from her. It was beyond wonderful. To continue my story, in early of 1996, my husband began spending a great deal of time being paralyzed with depression. He talked a lot of leaving me because he felt like I would be better off without him. There were several times at that time and in the future when he actually did try to leave in many ways. In a perfect world, before he ever came home from the hospital, there really should have been a follow-up plan put in place for him and for me and for our family. Brain injuries do not go away. They change the person forever, and thus the relationship with them must change. If someone had helped me understand this, and especially if they had been able to help him understand this, things would have been immeasurably different. It would have been life-changing to have someone we trusted to check in on us every few months or so. It really did help him to be in the outdoors a lot, so that summer of 1996, we went on lots of river trips. He was a river rat. We went on the San Juan River and the Moab Daily 3 different times with neighbors. I learned quickly that whenever we took people with us, it ensured a good time because my husband was always on his best behavior. The San Juan River trip was especially fun when we had people with us. I'm so glad we never attempted to do any of these alone as a family. Miracle. There was a day I remember getting out of my car. I felt my mom's presence distinctly telling me, "You need to have another baby." I spoke out loud to myself, I must be crazy. Ever since my son's birth, I assumed that we would not have more kids because I didn't want to bring another soul into the hell of contention and inconsistency that we lived in. But it put a thought in my mind that she was the one who had handpicked this little soul for me, and I could not deny it. Another miracle happened in early 1997 when the BSA hired him to be the director of their newest high adventure camp, which he named Entrada. That summer was so much fun because he was gone all summer. I could do whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted, with my 2 little ones, without worry. But most of all, we could enjoy consistent, happy, emotional feelings. It was certainly a wonderful summer. Soon after he left for the summer, I found out I was pregnant. It was so comforting to remember the impression I had from my mom about having another baby, telling me in that language without words that can only be felt that she would be there to help me and not to worry. Because of our obvious immersion in mortality, we cannot and do not easily sense those that have passed away but are still very close to us. I wrote about my son explaining to me that he knew his grandma loved him because he had gone to her in his dreams, and she told him so. I imagine there must have been many times he was protected and cared for by her. I have no doubt that those that have passed on are far closer than we realize. There have been many times since then when I have been still and quiet and reflected and have felt my mom nearby. I have even felt her words in my mind speaking to me. But in this world with its demands and cares that speak so loudly, it's difficult to create these moments and even more difficult to remember to do so. There were many times in particular that year when I felt her unmistakable influence. After my husband came home at the end of summer, he came back to himself and he began his habit of driving away down our very steep hill with music blaring. It made me wonder how long his life would be if he kept doing that. Finally, at the end of 1997, he agreed to take medication for depression. I had made a commitment to myself to stay, to stick it out, to understand, or at least to try to understand, to love, or at least to try to love. I knew I wasn't doing well, and I wasn't sure how long I could do it. I knew it wasn't love, yet I knew I loved him, or I loved who he was, who I felt his spirit would always be. I wasn't sure about the person I saw then. I just didn't know him well enough. Living this way is like having a problem with no clear definition and no answer. It just is. There is no end of the road, no light at the end of the tunnel, no definition of what you've got or what's wrong or how long it will last or maybe cures. My husband wouldn't even look at maybe cures or helps. Yet he experienced sudden, random, previously unknown, uncontrollable issues. When it's something no one completely understands or knows how to treat, you're forced to simply live with it one careful day at a time. I certainly felt like I was in a dream with someone I didn't know, and the pains of missing my mom were so great at times, it was hard to even breathe. But I did feel a lot of peace and strength from those times when I felt her nearby, when I was still enough to feel her presence. For so much of my life after my mom died, I did shut off my feelings because who could I share them with? Looking back, I know now that I needed to find someone to talk to, someone to really be open and vulnerable with and share my feelings with. The adversary tries to isolate us and encourage us to think we are the only ones that feel the way we do. It's simply not true. I have come to realize that most of us feel this despair and extreme loss, this deep pain over something at some time in our lives. I felt that, but I never did find anyone who understood about brain injuries, who could really help me or who could really help us. I felt so alone. My life would have been very different if I had a close friendship with an older lady, someone who I could really talk to. There seemed to be just enough hope, whether real or imagined, that kept me going. Like when the kids in the back seat were crying or fussing, he was less likely to turn up the volume of hard rock music so high so we couldn't hear them. That was triggering for me for a really long time, just hearing loud rock music. Sometimes it still is. For moms, unless children are asleep, the world is always a go, go, go. Incessant movement, sounds, energy, responsibility, and so it was with me. When you add in a husband who feels much more like one of the children, it felt very much like being a single parent. Fun story that I want to add, there was a day I was driving home after helping my daughter with her Christmas party, and my husband was supposed to pick up my son from preschool. For some reason, I had this feeling he didn't get picked up, like my husband had forgotten. And sure enough, he had, because as I was driving home, I noticed him walking up the hill alone. I pulled over and I said, "Hey, would you like a ride?" And he said, "No, I think I'll walk home." I told him I had some treats in the car, and he said, "Well, I guess I am kind of tired." So I drove him home, but obviously I was beyond astonished. No one at his preschool had even noticed that he was gone. We definitely took steps to ensure that that didn't happen again and that it didn't happen for other kids as well. That was just such a crazy story. It explains my son, his determination, awareness, and his sensitivity to things that were happening at the time. There was also a really interesting dream I had about the baby I was pregnant with. I dreamed I had the baby early and my mom was there. I knew she wasn't alive, but she delivered my baby to me. She brought her to me spiritually, and I was the only one who knew she was there. My labor was short and simple, and she helped me so much. It was a really cool dream. It hurt me at that time knowing she would never hold this baby in this life. Yet somehow I knew she was spending unexplainable time with this child, like she was telling her all about us and helping her so that she would more quickly recognize those spiritual things when she finally was born and was separated by that veil of forgetfulness. I know my mom was there. I could feel her so distinctly when I was still in those moments of peace and calm. I could feel her very, very strongly. I know our loved ones are with us, and we have an opportunity when we are still, when we are calm, to feel God's presence in our lives, to feel those angels and ancestors who are there to help us, who are never far away. And I know that God is always with us, even in those times when we feel desperately alone, when we feel like there's no earthly person nearby and certainly no heavenly help. It's simply the adversary speaking to our minds, trying to make us believe we're alone. We never really are. Until next time, keep on keeping on with God.